Greetings and welcome back to Homebrew. Today we'll be recapping Session 12 of the Call of the Hunger campaign and preparing for Session 13. Now, what did we do when our adventurers last set off? Emery finally got her hands on the Weeping Willows and carved them up, dispatching them with her comrades. Personally, I thought that fight went pretty well. We got a chance to use some of the abilities of the Weeping Willows. The players were like, "Whoa, how are these things rolling so much threat?" And I was able to tell them about some of the mechanics with them, expanding their brains a little bit on how we can use the pliability of Genesis to make different types of feats and skills, which I think the characters and players might eventually be able to use to think about different ways of leveling themselves up. The fight was just long enough that we were able to really get into it and feel like people were being engaged. But we didn't have it be this really awful slog fest where it took the whole day of actual time, right? And so we also got to see Emery used her poison to freeze up one. And I just thought it was really cool to see the players just interacting in the ways that they did. Um, After that, we had to do some travel, right? This was the time to make up some lost time sort of sequence for our characters to try to get to Lemoore. I thought that the quick travel aspect of it with the, hey, like, you guys encountered a bear along the way because you rolled terrible on your stealth or your survival skills. But instead of, zooming in and having to do the fight, we just said, hey, like, do your general melee combat skill or do a resilience check, and we'll see how much rough damage that you guys end up coming out of this. Of course, you prevail. Let's move on. I even got one of the players to say, hey, dude, that was really cool the way you did that afterward, which was nice for me because it was something that was a bit of a improv, right? And at the end of the day, we got a full session in and got the characters up to Lemoore. It felt like a really good spot for the characters to be left on a cliffhanger to really think and give themselves a chance to reorient themselves towards how they're going to engage with Lemoore. I thought that the aspects with the Call of the Hunger went pretty well. I capped how many conditions they were going to get to 3, and I figure every Twillet will just increase that by 1 based off of the cadence of the game. We'll say that the Cinder at this point isn't so feverish that he's creating these conditions that are just absolutely chaotic for the folks, but we could also see why the characters that they ran into, specifically the Asa Wayloon that was being cruel to that creature earlier, and we could see why he was doing that. Hanubo, thank you. I was just thinking about that for a little bit. We can see why Hanubo was acting the way he was, because now we've got some characters who are exhibiting similar traits, right? And then they got to cure them, right? And I think that was a great way of showing, hey, there's something going on in the woodlands specifically, right? But let's get back to that later. And as far as the timeline went, I think I gave them a little bit too much of a leeway, and said that they made up more time than they really would have. I think they ended up traveling faster than a horse on road or something like that, something a bit obnoxious. So I just carved off a couple days and left it the way it was as far as like how they did their rations and stuff like that, and then just messaged the players saying, hey, this is the day it's going to be. And it ended up being where they got there 5 days early, which is perfect because what this also gives them an option, and I mentioned this to one of the players, is like, hey, you actually have enough time where you could probably get back to the Watandu Last's summit with all of his guys, which was also going to be on the Twila, if that's something that you guys want. However, as a DM, we have to be prepared for a fun, engaging story arc in Lemoore, and that's something that we haven't had too much focus on. We've really been focused in on the woodlands, but as a primary base of operations that they're going to be launching themselves out and into the woodlands, I really wanted to start looking at what's going on in Lemoore. It seems that there's several opportunities for characters' side stories to really start to get some traction here too. Namely, I'm talking about any sort of interaction with the Onyx, which is a strong background for Emery, and both the other players, Ilya and Wretch, sort of Dustin and Austin, both mentioned that they had a strong interest in like taking down corrupt governments and stuff like that, which this is going to be the place to do it. So I really had to think a long time. And boy, have I been busy really filling out Lemoore. So that's what I've been spending a lot of the time since our last preparation session, thinking on and filling out. And one of the big items here is that we didn't have any structured maps or references, right? So what we did have is we have this backdrop, which I think is perfect for the setting of Lemoore. And so what I also wanted was I wanted to actually create the city so that way we were saying, hey, you're over here and you crossed this river and now you're over by this other, maybe this workstation or this other enemy base. I wanted them to be able to have something to go off of. And so I spent a huge portion of my time making this. So this is going to be their map of Lemoore. And what I have is I have all of the main prime dudes or faction headquarters here on the side here. So we start off with Bushman Farms, which they've met earlier, and so it's number 1. You go onto the map, you can see that there's a number 1 over here. That's essentially, I just listed all of the main places that they would interact with. Some of these ones you probably don't even know the names of, even if you're paying very good attention to the beginning. For instance, I had to come up with the name of where the Natari were based off of, and that's that gang of these bug people. So I named their main headquarters the Scarab, and I put that on the map. So there's a couple of things like that as well. And so this will just give the party a general idea of if they're going to, go attack a certain place, or if they're going to go and investigate the alchemy dealings over here or something like that. Now they have a general idea of what's going on and where. It also helps kind of recap. Verbally, we gave them the bit of like how the city works and functions. But some people are visual learners, so this will really help ground some of those players and help them remember what we're talking about as well. So it was a lot of work, but I think it'll pay off. And I got to add it to my world for future campaigns and stuff like that too. So the only other thing that I did with the map really is that I added to my main story notes here is generic places that I may or may not ever put on the map, but I needed to have, someone's like, hey, where do I go for alchemy? Well, Bitterroot's Business is a cheap alchemist. I think Bitterroot's Business is something that's going to be like someone who's taking the waste products from the alchemy facilities and manufacturing facilities, and he's rebottling them and selling them as smokes or alchemy materials, right? We've got the linen spinner, who's someone who finds a place for you to sleep through people who have homes in the local area, and they basically rent out a bed, so to speak. So if people are looking for something in particular to do, now we've got generic places that we can come up with rather than trying to think of it on the spot. And then I've got some generic NPC names that we can just copy and paste and move over into the area for, if they're going to be interacting with a smith. So I just look at this list here. Smith, we've got arms and armor. So if they want to buy something that's a weapon or a piece of armor, they can go to Stornholt's Arms and Armor. So now, well, who runs it? Well, someone probably by the last name of Stornholt. So now I go down to this list at the bottom. I can do Mesa Stornholt, Dolan Stornholt, Getrick Stornholt. What I'll do is I'll just describe them in the middle of the session, just whatever comes to my mind at the top of my head, and then I'll make some quick reference notes in game as to how I describe them, and that's what we'll use for most of the things that the characters want to do in the business. In the city. Then we had to come up with some side quests, right? So we already had some, so all I did is I took some of the old ones, like finding Wylan Buckham, the centaur who went missing when he went to Lemoore, and I just paraphrased them and put them into here. I took some of the items from the characters' backstories. Emery from Taking Root, she had a backstory with Osaya, and some potential chemical contamination for Osaya. And so what I did is I used that and expanded on it. So I started to create a aberrant subjects side quest from that. I just got a quick little summary here, and where they can find Osaya, where they can find Boyar, which was Osaya's first mate. We also had to, so I made the Flotsam experiments. So some people are been really ill and having been downtrodden society. What can the people who want to make the city a better place, what can they do for these guys? What else did we do? Recalls. So we've got the local people who basically are. If you ever seen Total Recall, basically these guys are doing something along those lines. I think it's Total Recall. Whatever the movie is where they're like, you buy an organ from someone and then you don't pay them. These guys come back and they recall that organ. That's what these guys do, but with if you get a new arm or something like that. So these guys are going to say, hey, if you're looking for business or if you're looking for money, come and work for us. And then what we can do is just have the flotsam, the people who were experimented on. If they are some like really rude people who just didn't want to pay, maybe we can send our party after them or something like that. Or if the party wants to take down the harvesters, now they know, come to the tabernacle if you're looking for money. Well, come to the tabernacle if you're looking to start working on all of the corruption in the city. I also gave Wretch a little bit more details about why he was being hunted in the city. So here we say Wretch called one of the models, which was a woman by the name of Wella, who was grafted a cow udder successfully. He called her an abomination. Well, she didn't like that, and she was considered a huge success in town. It would be like similar of like an actor, and her creator, which would be similar to like a director in our days, right? So like the popular people in town got a lot of money. They didn't like that, so essentially they said, "Harvesters, go shut this guy up. He's shaming people, and basically creating a unsafe place for this world's freaks to come and get these medical procedures that they want. We don't like that. Kick him out of the city." So now we've got a little bit more detail on that we can give our player. I think we actually talked a little bit about this in our last session. We got a little bit more background for Wretch, and then we have some side quest options. And then what we also had to think about is, so we've got these two gangs, the Bronze and we've got the Natari, right? And the characters have already had some interaction with them. In fact, the Natari thought the players were going to take their information to the Queen Paratisium and say, hey, the Natari are doing you guys a solid by avenging the death of the old comrade for Emery, right? And the party didn't do that. So what kind of commotion does this cause, right? The Bronze know that Emery and Archek, there we go, the name came to me, knew about this soul gem thing, which is very bad for what we know. So the Bronze are very worried about that. They're trying to find and kill Emery, right? And Emery's group. So now they meanwhile the party was gone. These guys were trying to figure out, okay, who knows about this stuff and how do we get our hands on them? So meanwhile, the two gangs are fighting. It briefly detailed what that has looked like since, and I've got a potential for escalation, right? So there's this virus breaking out in the city based off of the stuff that was on the Leeward Star in Emery's background. So that stuff's breaking out. It's causing some nonsense. The Natari are fighting, and I just kind of wrote down some thoughts about if these groups come into contact with the party again, how would they react, and how do we make sure that we're not going to paint ourselves into a corner, but we actually make a ramp for the story to continue, right? And so just a couple quick paragraphs on that to think it through. Here I got some bolded stuff. Petrogovich Bank will have records of employment for Ephemeria. So we have the vampires who stole Emery's family. They're working for the Bronze, this Onyx gang. The gang is from an old background, having previously funded and had some antics with the Cave Wars back in the day, which Petrogovich Bank was the one that is basically like a front for this gang, right? So they would have records of employing this vampire and using all this. So now the party has a way to, one, work against corruption, and two, work towards finding more information about Emery's family and either vengeance or trying to save someone, right? So essentially, that's what we've been working on this whole time. There's a lot, but I think it's going to pay off doing a lot of this legwork. Now that we've got Lemoore set up, it's going to run a little bit more like the Woodlands as far as how much work we have to do to keep the ball rolling now that we just got it off the front. So our players are going to try to figure out how to get into town. And from there, so I also mentioned that once they do get into town, I had to make some generic city maps, right? So we got a map here, but I also had to make combat maps, right? So what could possibly go down, right? They could run into the harvesters who are still after Wretch, potentially. They could run into the Onyx. They could run into a whole bunch of just random shit that's part of the ecosystem, right? Oozes from the toxic sludge and gnolls and Duragar and all these other guys. So what I decided to do is make a couple different maps. I made 4 different maps of the different areas using Dungeon Alchemist as this loads in. And then what I did is I made a huge list of adversaries. I just copied and pasted a whole bunch of the stat blocks that I already had, and I just made a list of everything that could possibly be something that they're going to run into here in the city. Chimeras, Onyx, generic stat blocks for some type of people that they would run into, like thieves and whatnot. And then I made a quick table of contents so I could quickly reference it. And then from there, what I did is I made a blank page of just all of the figures, so I don't have to rifle through all my folders. I just got this this page here that will give me 90% of what the party could fight, and I can just copy this and paste it into one of those battle maps, and then just say roll initiative, and then give them all initiatives using the stat blocks that I have on an extra Google Sheet right now. So after that, it's pretty much improv. If the party runs into some guys who are getting drunk at the bar, maybe they start a fight with some gnolls. Copy paste a couple of gnolls into the streets, into the tavern. Copy paste the characters into there. Roll initiative, right? They are running through the tunnels. They run into an ooze. Copy paste the ooze into there. Copy paste the players into there. Roll initiative, right? And then just kind of figure out from here, where does the party want to go? That's ultimately what we're going to start the next session in this. Hey guys, you made it to Lemoore. How are you guys going to get into Lemoore, right? Let's use the map. Figure out, do you want to go over the wall? Do you want to go through some of the ports? Do you want to go through some of the main doors, right? And that's why we have those tools here and ready to go. So that's all I got for you today for preparation on session 13 of Call of the Hunger. Stay tuned. Join us on Mondays. Every other Monday. Our next session is going to be on, I believe, coming up this Monday, which I can't do dates in my head here at all. That would be the 12th. So I'm looking forward to seeing you. If you have questions or comments, if you want me to go into more depth on what I did to prepare, feel free to throw comments onto the video, and I'll get back to you. Or join us live, and we can answer your questions right there and in the middle of the session. So thank you, and looking forward to it. See you guys.